Joining us for more, Tom Rogers, Executive Chairman of NGN Media and the first president of NBC Cable. He's also the former CEO of TiVo, which was the first company to bring Netflix to the TV screen. Tom, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. I mean, just looking at the numbers, adding over the course of the first 2 quarters of this year, 26 million paid net additions, taking the total to 193. Is it fair to assume that they brought forward a lot of demand that's going to tail off now for the second half of the year?
Well, they might have, but the thing to focus on with Netflix is how much superior its model is to all the other streaming services out there, how it's the only one with a global play. And globally, there are 1.1 billion pay TV, cable and satellite subscribers who are disconnecting their cable and satellite, as we are finding here in the United States. So if they're at about 200 million, they got about 900 million market to tap that is moving in the direction of streaming around the rest of the world. And Netflix is the only one with a real international footprint right now to be able to capture that. So their guidance next quarter, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, that they pulled through a number of subscribers, but I wouldn't take your put your eye focus too much on that. There's so much long-term opportunity here. This company's story is totally intact.
I totally get your point, Tom, in terms of the global opportunity. What about in North America? Are they starting to be a bit saturated there? And what does that mean for their overall average selling price?
Well, they do have about 80% of the cable and satellite subscriber base. So they're moving in a direction of greater saturation. But as more and more people come on that are cord nevers, not to mention the cord cutters, there is demographic trend opportunity there, which is very substantial. Moreover, what Netflix has going with the quality and quantity of its programming, as your earlier guests were talking about, is far more depth in terms of holding people to the screen, much greater engagement. And the biggest problem for streaming services is not so much getting new members, it's holding them. It's the churn factor. Other services are churning much, much more. And what low churn, which Netflix has, and I think over time even lower churn, as it has that much more viewing power through that much bigger programming budget, it has pricing power. So here in the United States, I think you will find that it has unique pricing power, even though the rate of its subscriber growth will slow because it is penetrated so heavily.
Tom, how do you read the Ted Sarandos being named co-CEO alongside Reed Hastings? And just trying to think of some examples where this has worked, where you have a founder, co-CEO with another longtime executive. Didn't really work out at Salesforce. What do you make of it?
Well, these guys clearly have a hell of a partnership that they've been able to do what they've done. On the programming side, you got to tip your hat to Netflix. I remember in my NBC days when we used to scratch our head, why can't there be more than 1 or 2 hits a season, modest hits often at that? And the issue was always, well, there just aren't good enough good writers out there. Well, Netflix found a lot of good writers doing a lot of good content, and it's elevated it to where it is, and he deserves that kind of recognition. And Reed is so well entrenched as a visionary who has brought this forward. They clearly work extremely well together, and my guess is this will work very well.
What do you think, Tom, of the way the pandemic not just has influenced their subscriber numbers, but the way we're consuming feature-length movies, not just series?
Well, that's a really interesting point there, because the movie theater industry theatrical release window, I think, is going to be the thing in the entire media industry that gets most damaged by the pandemic. My expectation is you got a lot of movies that were ready for release, can't be released, studios running to Netflix and say, please, please, will you buy this from me? Because they really have a problem here in terms of when theaters are going to reopen nationally in a way that box office revenues are going to be restored. So coming out of the pandemic, I expect the impact of that to be much shorter, theatrical windows, meaning movies in the theaters for a shorter period of time and less exclusivity. And that's just going to put that much more value on movies being on streaming services and Netflix having the biggest budgets, having the greatest ability to buy movies, not to mention producing their own. I think you're going to see more and more theatricals being a matter of streaming and less about movie theater viewing.
Tom Rogers, always good to get your thoughts. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.